They told her the suite wasn't available. They told her there must have been a mistake with the reservation. Two front desk clerks at one of Montreal's most prestigious hotels looked at a black woman in a tailored wool coat standing beside two pieces of matching luggage and decided before she even opened her mouth a second time that she didn't belong there. They thought she would be embarrassed enough to leave quietly. They thought no one important was watching. They had no idea that the woman they were dismissing had spent 19 years defending the country that printed the flag on the hotel's lobby wall. And they had absolutely no idea who was pulling into the valet lane outside at that exact moment. This is the story of how a single act of arrogance unraveled an entire empire of small cruelties. The November wind off the St. Lawrence had a particular bite to it that Saturday afternoon, the kind that gets under your coat no matter how well it's tailored. Lieutenant Colonel Fatima Adeyemi-Osei stepped through the revolving doors of the Hotel Champlain Grand, carrying herself the way 19 years in the Canadian Armed Forces teaches a person to carry themselves. Back straight, eyes level, every movement deliberate. She was 44 years old. She had served 2 tours in Mali, 1 in Latvia, and had spent the last 3 years as a senior logistics officer at Canadian Forces Base Valcartier, 40 minutes north of where she was now standing. She was not in uniform. She was wearing a dark burgundy wool coat, a cream blouse, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes not from wealth but from having made decisions under fire that most people couldn't comprehend. Her reading glasses were folded in her breast pocket. Her natural hair was pulled back simply. She looked, to anyone paying real attention, like exactly what she was. A woman of extraordinary accomplishment, taking a weekend away from an extraordinary amount of responsibility. Her daughter's wedding rehearsal dinner was the following evening. The wedding itself, Sunday afternoon at a heritage chapel in Old Montreal. Fatima had booked the Hotel Champlain Grand 3 months prior, specifically the Champlain suite on the 8th floor, a room she had saved for and chosen deliberately because her daughter, Amélie, had once pointed at a photo of it in a magazine and said, "Maman, someday I want to stay somewhere like that." Fatima had written down the name of the hotel that same evening. The reservation and confirmation was in her email. The charge had cleared her account 11 weeks ago. She approached the front desk with her confirmation number ready. The clerk who looked up first was a man in his late 20s named Philippe, according to his name badge. He had the practiced, surface-level smile of someone who had learned to perform hospitality without actually practicing it. "Bonjour. I have a reservation. Adeyemi-Osei, the Champlain suite." Philippe's smile didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He frowned slightly at his screen. He typed again. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not seeing a suite reservation under that name. It was booked 3 months ago. I have the confirmation number." Fatima placed her phone on the counter, the email visible. Philippe looked at it briefly. He typed again, with the particular slowness of someone who has already decided on the answer and is simply performing the process of looking. "What I see here," he said, "is a standard room reservation. Not the suite. That's not correct. I booked the Champlain suite. The charge on my account reflects the suite rate." A second clerk materialized, a woman, mid-30s, named Colette, who had clearly been monitoring the exchange from the adjacent station. She leaned slightly toward Philippe in the way colleagues do when they've developed a shared language for these situations. "Is there a concern with the reservation?" Colette asked, directing the question at Philippe rather than at Fatima. "The guest is claiming a suite booking that isn't showing in the system," Philippe said. Fatima looked at Colette directly. "I'm not claiming anything. I have documentation. The Champlain suite was reserved and paid for 11 weeks ago." Colette glanced at the phone screen with the expression of someone reviewing a child's drawing. "Sometimes there are errors on third-party booking platforms that can lead to misunderstandings about room categories. I booked directly through your hotel's website." "Even so," Colette said, her voice taking on the particular texture of performative sympathy, "the suite is currently occupied through Sunday. There's nothing we can do about that, unfortunately. Then whoever is occupying it was checked in incorrectly, because that room was paid for by me." "I understand this is frustrating," Colette said, which is the thing people say when they have no intention of fixing the frustration. "What I can offer you is a lovely superior room on the 6th floor with a view of the courtyard. It's a beautiful room." Fatima was quiet for a moment. The lobby was busy. A Saturday afternoon in November, a wedding season weekend in the city. People moved around her with their luggage, their weekend plans, their lives. She was aware of how she looked to the people passing. She was aware of what was happening. She had been aware of what was happening since the moment Philippe's eyes had moved from her face to his screen without genuine effort. "I would like to speak with your manager," she said. The manager, who appeared after a 10-minute wait, was a man named Gilles Fortier, the weekend duty manager, A compact man in his 50s with a silver lapel pin and the energy of someone who considered his primary job to be resolving inconveniences before they became complaints. He arrived with the particular smile of a person who has been briefed by his staff before leaving the back office. "Madame," he said warmly, "I understand there's been some confusion about your reservation. Let me take a look personally." He made a show of reviewing the screen. He made a show of consulting with Philippe in a low voice. Then he turned back to Fatima with the expression of a man delivering disappointing news about a flight delay, regret that is entirely performative because the inconvenience is not his. "What I'm seeing," Fortier said, "is that the suite was reassigned earlier this week due to a maintenance issue. These things happen, unfortunately, and the system should have notified you. I do apologize for that lapse in communication. What maintenance issue?" Fortier blinked. "I'm sorry. You said the suite was reassigned due to a maintenance issue. What is the maintenance issue? Is the room currently occupied or is it under repair?" A beat of silence. There were some concerns with the HVAC system that required. "Because your colleague just told me the suite was occupied through Sunday." Those are two different explanations for the same room. Fortier's smile remained in place the way a stage set remains standing after the play has ended, technically present, structurally hollow. Regardless of the specific situation, the outcome is the same. "The suite isn't available for your stay. Is it because of my reservation specifically, or did you overbook?" "We would never intentionally." "Then, show me the maintenance report." "Madame, I don't think this needs to become. I have a confirmation. I have a payment receipt. I have a contract with this hotel for a specific room. Either that room is available, in which case you give me what I paid for, or it isn't, in which case you explain to me in writing why the room was reassigned after being sold to me, and you compensate me accordingly." Fatima's voice had not risen. It had, if anything, become quieter, which is a different thing entirely from becoming calmer. Fortier looked at her. In his years of hotel management, he had developed an instinct for the arc of a complaint, how much heat it would generate, how quickly it would resolve. The woman standing across from him was not the kind of heat that dissipated. She was the kind that found oxygen. "Let me see what I can do," he said, and retreated. What he did, over the following 20 minutes, was nothing. He returned with a room upgrade offer. A junior suite on the 5th floor, $200 off the rate, which was not what had been purchased, not what had been confirmed, and represented a saving of approximately $200 on a room that had cost Fatima considerably more than that. "This is not equivalent accommodation," she said. "It's the best we can offer at this time." "Then I'll need that in writing, along with the name of your regional director." Fortier's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I can provide you with our guest services contact." I asked for the regional director. It was at that moment that the lobby doors opened. The man who walked in was 31 years old, 6'2", wearing a dark green jacket and carrying a garment bag over one shoulder. He was the kind of physically imposing that has nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with a body that has been trained for a decade and a half to operate under conditions that most people only read about. His name was Major Brigadier-Osei, Royal Canadian Regiment, currently on leave from a posting at CFB Petawawa. He was Fatima's nephew. He had been her dead sister's only son. He had grown up in her house for 3 years after his mother passed, and he called her Tante Fatima the way some people say grace, out of genuine reverence rather than habit. He had driven from Ottawa that morning. He was in Montreal for the wedding. He spotted Fatima at the front desk from across the lobby and immediately read the set of her shoulders. He walked over without being summoned. "Tante." His voice was low. "What's happening?" "A misunderstanding about my reservation," she said, with a tone that communicated the situation was not in fact a misunderstanding. Darius looked at Fortier. He did not raise his voice, he did not perform authority. He simply looked at the man the way soldiers look at problems, as something to be assessed, not accommodated. "Can you explain to me what's going on with her booking?" Fortier straightened slightly, the instinctive recalibration of a person suddenly less certain of the room. "There's been an issue with the room availability that we're working to resolve. She has a confirmed reservation for the Champlain suite. That confirmation is on her phone. The payment cleared 11 weeks ago." Darius paused. "Is the room available or not?" "The room has a maintenance situation that... Is someone in that room right now?" Another pause, a longer one. Fortier's assistant, a young man who had been hovering near the computer terminal, made the mistake of visibly suppressing a reaction. "That reaction," Darius said quietly, looking at the assistant, "tells me everything about whether there's actually a maintenance situation." Fortier's composure cracked slightly at the edges. "Sir, I assure you this is a standard. My aunt drove down from Valcartier this afternoon for her daughter's wedding rehearsal. She has a confirmed paid booking for a specific room. You are telling her that room isn't available while simultaneously giving her two different explanations for why. That's not a maintenance issue, that's a decision someone made. Darius looked at Fortier steadily. I'd like to know who made it and I'd like to know why. I'm not able to discuss internal. Then I'll call your corporate office directly. Darius reached into his jacket pocket and produced his own phone. I have the number for Champlain Hotel's Senior Vice President of Operations. I've stayed at properties in this group before and had occasion to find it. He said it simply, without menace, the way a person states a fact. Fortier looked at the phone. He looked at Darius. He looked finally at Fatima. Let me make some calls, he said. While Fortier disappeared again, Darius turned to his aunt and said nothing for a moment. He just stood there where family stands, not solving anything yet, simply being present. Which is sometimes the most important thing. You should have called me when this started, he said. I was handling it. I know you were. He paused. That's not why I said it. She looked at him. How was the drive? Long. The 417 was a mess past Hawkesbury. He looked around the lobby, the other guests, the bellhops, the festive November decorations near the entrance. A hotel dressed for the season, performing its hospitality for everyone except the woman standing at its desk. Amelie knows you're here. She doesn't need to know about this. No, he agreed. She doesn't. What happened over the next 40 minutes unfolded the way these things tend to unfold when the person being dismissed turns out to be considerably less isolated than the dismissers assumed. Fatima, while waiting, had sent 2 emails. The first was to the Champlain Hotel's corporate complaints address, attaching her confirmation, payment receipt, and a clear timeline of the exchange at the front desk. The second was to a woman named Brigadier-General Marguerite Tessier-Blanc, the commander of 2 Canadian Division in Montreal, who was also the mother of the groom, meaning she was already in the city, had already checked into a different hotel that morning, and happened to receive Fatima's message within 4 minutes of its being sent. The response from Brigadier-General Tessier-Blanc was 3 words, on my way. The general arrived 22 minutes later in civilian clothes, accompanied by her aide, who was in uniform. She walked through the lobby of the Hotel Champlain Grand with the particular efficiency of a person who has never needed to announce herself because her presence always did it for her. She went directly to Fatima. They embraced briefly. Then the general turned and looked at the front desk. Who's the manager on duty? She asked, to no one in particular, at a volume the entire desk could hear. Fortier reappeared with the specific expression of a man who has just been told on the phone that the situation he thought was manageable is not. He had, in the preceding 20 minutes, received a call from his regional director, who had received a call from corporate, who had received Fatima's email, and done the basic professional due diligence of looking up the name Adeyemi-Osei in their loyalty system and discovering that the reservation had indeed been for the Champlain suite, that no maintenance ticket had been opened for that room this week or the week prior, and that the suite had in fact been reassigned that morning to accommodate a corporate client, the hotel considered higher priority. What the regional director said to Fortier was brief and not kind. What Fortier now said to Fatima was a great deal longer and significantly more apologetic, though the apology had the flavor of a document that has been revised several times rather than a feeling that has been genuinely experienced. The Champlain suite, it turned out, was available. It had been available all afternoon. The corporate client had been moved to a different suite, one that was, by the hotel's own inventory, of equivalent quality. This had taken 12 minutes to arrange, once someone with authority had decided it was worth arranging. Philippe, who had started the afternoon's events with a glance at a confirmation number and a decision made before the search had finished, was nowhere to be seen. Colette had developed a sudden and absorbing interest in her computer screen. Fatima accepted the key card for the Champlain suite without warmth. She asked for the exchange to be documented, for a written acknowledgement of what had occurred, and for the name and direct contact of the regional director, which this time was provided without hesitation. Darius carried her luggage to the elevator without being asked. In the elevator, Fatima looked at the floor indicator above the doors. You know, she said quietly. I almost just left, Darius said. It would have been easier. Easier isn't the same as right. The elevator doors opened on the 8th floor. The hallway was wide and carpeted, lined with framed photographs of the St. Lawrence in different seasons. The suite was at the end of the hall. Darius set the luggage down at the door and handed Fatima the key card. She paused before opening the door, not from hesitation, from something closer to deliberateness, the choosing of how a moment is entered. The suite was everything her daughter's magazine photograph had promised. The city lay out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, November grey and glittering, the river dark and wide below the old city rooftops. There were 2 armchairs near the window and a writing desk in the corner and fresh flowers on the table and the particular stillness of a room that has been well kept and was now finally occupied by the person who had paid for it. Fatima even stood out for a long moment. "She's going to love this," she said. Not about the room exactly. About the idea of it. About the thing that had been saved for and chosen and almost taken and then reclaimed. "She is," Darius agreed. What happened after was documented, as Fatima had insisted. The formal complaint she filed with Chaplain Hotels Corporate was taken seriously in the way that complaints are taken seriously when the person filing them is specific, articulate, and evidently prepared to continue filing until the appropriate people have been held accountable. The regional director called personally to apologize. The hotel's general manager, who had not been on duty that day, sent a written letter acknowledging that the room reassignment had been handled improperly and that the explanations offered to the guest had been inconsistent and inadequate. Gilles Fortier, the duty manager, was placed on a performance improvement plan. He did not remain in his role long afterward. Philippe was suspended pending an internal review of the exchange, during which the hotel examined several months of front desk interactions. What they found was not surprising to anyone who had ever been on the receiving end of a smile that didn't reach the eyes. He was not reinstated. Colette remained, on the condition of completing sensitivity training that she completed in the particular spirit of someone who has been told to complete something. The regional director also made a decision, a few weeks later, to revise the hotel chain's overbooking and room reassignment protocols, specifically to add a requirement that any guest with a confirmed specialty room booking be directly contacted before that room was reassigned, regardless of who the alternative guest was. It was a small policy change, because policies are the accumulated weight of decisions that should not have had to be made in the first place. Amélie's wedding rehearsal dinner happened the following evening, in a private dining room 3 blocks from the hotel. Fatima sat at the head of the table in a deep blue dress and laughed at the speeches in the warm, easy way of someone who had walked through something difficult and come out the side without losing anything essential. Darius sat beside her and ate too much, and at some point gave a toast so straightforward and heartfelt that it made the groom's side of the table cry. Brigadier-General Tessier Blanc at the end of the evening leaned over and said quietly to Fatima, "I'm glad you sent that email." "So am I," Fatima said. The wedding was on Sunday. The St. Lawrence was grey and cold beyond the chapel windows. Amélie walked down the aisle in a gown that had taken 8 months to make, and when she reached the front of the chapel and turned to look at her mother in the front row, the look on her face was not about the dress or the flowers or the careful precision of the ceremony. It was about the woman sitting there, her back straight, her eyes bright, the quiet smile of someone who does not bend easily and has never once confused bending with grace. Fatima had told her daughter nothing about the previous afternoon. She didn't need to. What happened at the Hotel Champlain Grand was that weekend. It was a footnote. The story was in that aisle, and that gown, and that look across a candlelit chapel. But footnotes matter. They are where the accountability lives. There are people in positions of small authority who believe that their position is the same thing as their power. They look at someone and perform a calculation. How much resistance will this person put up? How much noise will they make? Who is standing behind them? And they make their decisions based on that calculation, rather than on what is right or documented or paid for. They believe they understand the room. Lieutenant Colonel Fatima Adeyemi-Osei had navigated bureaucracies more fortified than a hotel lobby. She had filed reports in field conditions that made her corporate complaints. Inbox looked like a suggestion box. She had commanded logistics operations across 3 continents. She did not make noise. She made records. And Major Darius Osei had learned from her, as all the best soldiers learn from the people who raised them, that dignity is not a request you make of other people. It is a standard you hold regardless of whether the people across from you have chosen to meet it. The Hotel Champlain Grand still stands on its corner in Old Montreal. The river still moves past it, indifferent to what happens inside. The Champlain suite on the 8th floor still has those floor-to-ceiling windows and those armchairs and that view. And somewhere in a revised employee handbook, in a protocols document that most guests will never see and most staff will never think about, there is a paragraph that exists because a woman in a burgundy coat stood at a desk and refused to accept that inconvenience was the same thing as resolution. It's a small paragraph, but it will protect the next person who walks through those doors carrying a confirmation number and the quiet confidence of someone who has earned, in every possible sense, the right to be there. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that dignity doesn't negotiate. Subscribe to Voices of Courage for more stories of people who stood their ground and changed the ground they stood on. and tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Fatima's place?